Tom Sleigh is a Common Councilman in the City of London and Deputy Chair of the Policy and Resources Committee. He's also Head of Public Sector Alliances and Partnerships at Amazon, so looks at the current crisis from a really interesting perspective. And a key city role he has is Chair of the Property Investment Board. They look after the Barbican, housing revenue account, wholesale markets, cultural buildings, almshouses, and of course, office buildings. So Tom, I was keen to know what you felt the impact of the pandemic was having on the city's portfolio.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I mean, I'm very much speaking in my capacity here as a City of London councillor. And the property board that that I chair manages a pretty large portfolio. But I think the first thing to know is it's quite a varied mix of tenant types. So unlike certain other developers and property owners, we don't just have, say, all retail. We have a big mix. We have retail, we have large offices, we have small offices, we have, a fairly healthy mix, which has meant that we haven't seen, just one massive impact on the portfolio than perhaps some retail-focused ones have had. We can't really talk about the impact on the valuation. The valuations take much longer. We also have quite long rent refreshes, so we can't even see yet what's happening in terms of the rental valuation. But what I can say is we've actually seen a pretty healthy return in terms of the rents that are being paid. Surprisingly, we know that some property companies are seeing kind of huge numbers of defaults, which we're not seeing. But of course, we are feeling and trying to share the pain with our retail tenants, because of course, most of our retail is right in the centre of London, and therefore the footfall that they would usually expect would come from people in offices, and those people have up until this week and frankly probably still will do for several months not be in the square mile. And so with no footfall at all, we have seen retail tenants really struggle. And it's not privileged information to know that the city we led the pack in terms of large city landlords in providing some support for retail tenants. We deferred rent straight away in the previous quarter, and we've now started to implement a policy of looking at the most at-risk tenants in that portfolio, which is largely going to be retail, but not only retail, and looking at what further support we might give them, both in terms of deferrals, but also some rent holidays too. And there might be more support coming as well. So I think as a landlord, we sit on the scale, if you like, if there is a scale from kind of really hard-nosed landlords all the way through to kind of purely benevolent, kind of a charity landlords. We're near that benevolent end because we are a local authority, and we appreciate the importance of having a vibrant mix and community here in the square mile and further afield as well. So it's been a mixed picture. We can only hope that, and as we are recording this, the shops outside, I live right in the centre of London, the shops outside are beginning to open up again. We can only hope that their businesses start to recover and that we start to see a healthy and vibrant city streetscape and retail sector return.
How do you see the future of offices in the city? Because as we're seeing more home working, will that have an impact on the amount of offices that are required in city centres?
I think you might see that there are two trends. I think the first will be we're going to move away, I suspect, from this kind of metric-driven approach to how many square feet you need per person, or 1.3 desks per office staff member. This kind of battery chicken approach, which perhaps has happened in some offices. I think we're going to move away from that. I think we're going to move towards more communal space, more open space, more green space around offices, the kind of places inside offices where people can sit down and talk and chat. And I think that's been driven by the fact that we have, frankly, I think, experienced over the last few months that we're missing human interaction, and we're missing the importance of meeting people face to face. And whilst it's amazing how the technology has allowed us to keep businesses going, I think the point is coming where people are actually beginning to crave human contact again. And so I don't think that's going to mean we see everyone moving to virtual. I think we're going to still have demand for offices. I think you might see companies perhaps taking less space than they would, or taking different types of space. I think we have seen some of the big firms that are taking office space in the city now are perhaps not exercising the options for the extra 3 floors in the building because they don't think they might need it in the future. So I think there's going to be a physical change. I think the type of space, the shared spaces will change. But I don't think we're going to see a kind of a fleeing from city centres. I think people like cities. I think people like the vibrancy of them. I think people quite like offices, actually, if they're good quality offices. And so maybe then the third point is I suspect there may be a drive to higher quality, to more quality in the built environment, and particularly in commercial real estate. The things I would say, and I think it was a lady, an architect I was talking to, who made a really good point, actually, which is like, for a lot of younger people who can't afford big houses, who perhaps just rent a room in a shared 4-bedroom flat, they're living and working and and existing in the same room, the bedroom, all the time now, and like it's horrible, frankly, for a lot of them. And I think there's a kind of duty of care that organisations have around providing office space. So Amazon told us to work from home until October, but they've now said if you want to come in and use the office, you can. And that, I think, is a recognition that some people are struggling at home. I don't think home working is as lovely and as fun and as relaxing as people think.
So you've recently taken over as chairman of the Barbican Centre. So after COVID-19, the cultural centre will be even more important in the life of our cities. Are our current problems likely to blow the culture mile and associated projects off course, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously the pandemic has been hugely impactful on every sort of cultural institution. Anything that brings people together physically has essentially stopped, and that's been the case kind of globally. But Culture Mile, the city is absolutely committed to it, and it's not just one thing. It is bringing together those institutions. It's giving voice to them. It's helping to rebuild and rethink the built environment in the square mile and shift that centre of gravity, of kind of cultural gravity, if you like, from the West End eastwards through here into the city. I mean, I can say the Barbican Centre has developed plans for reopening, and in line with government advice and Public Health England advice, we will soon, I hope, start to see the doors of the Barbican opening in some ways to visitors again. And your point at the beginning is absolutely right. If cities are going to remain viable and attractive, one of the absolutely critical things there is going to be having a rich cultural offer. I mean, that's why a lot of people choose to come and locate their businesses in London or come to work for businesses in London. And I think the Corporation of London is the 4th or the 5th biggest funder of culture in the whole of the country. I mean, the commitment that we have placed on culture, not just through the Barbican, although that is the kind of the crown jewel of what we offer, but also through Culture Mile, that is absolutely a commitment that we are keeping.
I mean, looking back through history, the city changed massively after the plague in 1665, the fire in 1666, and it actually changed the way London developed thereafter. How do you see the square mile in sort of 5-10 years' time and its relationship to the rest of the capital?
I mean, I'm very upbeat about it. I think first thing to say is I don't think as difficult and as incredibly sad COVID-19 has been, I don't think it's comparable to the Great Fire. I don't think it's comparable to the plague or the Blitz or a lot of the analogies that people have been making. I don't think that's the case. I mean, not least because there hasn't been the kind of widespread physical damage that the fire produced for the city. I think what it's done though is it's brought forward policy decisions and brought forward thinking and perhaps emboldened those who were thinking a bit more laterally, particularly around things like pedestrianisation, prioritising pedestrians and cyclists, which has been part of the city's kind of local plan anyway. But now we are pushing forward more quickly, and you probably know, only 2 weeks ago, the city signed experimental traffic orders to close a significant number of streets. We've been widening our pavements, we're narrowing some of the roads. A lot of these roads are now fully pedestrianised. I suspect that will be a trend that continues and doesn't reverse. And I think that as we plan further for the future, not just in terms of buildings, but in terms of the kind of the open spaces and the streetscape, I think we will be always mindful of actually that this kind of movement towards pedestrianisation happening in cities across the world is now more of the norm than it is the exception.
You have plans to move the city's wholesale markets out to Barking and Dagenham. How's that going?
So it's not something I'm specifically involved in. That's a different part of the city. but I do know the city is really committed to moving the markets. I mean, London, the corporation has managed the major wholesale markets for as long as I know, and we relocated some of them. And I think one of them or two of them in the 70s, and we are absolutely committed to relocating them. The site's been found. It's a huge opportunity to invest in one of our kind of neighbouring partner boroughs. I know Barking and Dagenham are really excited about this. And if you think about some of the opportunities that could arise from consolidating the markets, not just in terms of like making them run more efficiently, but taking trucks off the streets of London, so improving the air quality, or in terms of providing a visitor attraction, or providing educational opportunities, providing cookery schools, providing training and apprenticeship opportunities, like massive opportunities. It's on the river, opening up the river, using that for deliveries into the square mile, and then the last mile of deliveries might be done by carbon neutral vehicles, by perhaps bike or electric vehicle. There's so much thinking going on. I'm not heavily involved in it, but what I have seen about it is it's perhaps one of the most exciting things the corporation has done for a very long time, and I would just say watch this space, because it's something the corporation is doing, and I'm super excited to see how it develops.
Always good to look to a positive future in this current crisis. So Tom Sleigh, thank you very much for your insights and for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Peter.